Okay, we just heard the bell. Hello, Jack. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Jack.
And Pam is running a little late. So I think we'll get started. Where's Dylan? Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to ask that you all remain standing as we remember a former Delaware Valley School Board member, Helen Gassman, passed away this week. She was with us for many years. Thank you. Please be seated. Julie, can we have a roll call, please?
Here.
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 Yeah.
Here. Here.
And I will read the mission statement tonight. Delaware Valley School District, in partnership with our community, stands committed to maximizing student potential, fostering lifelong learning, and promoting responsible citizenship. I do want to announce that there was an executive session held on April 8th to discuss personnel. And for those of you who are watching via YouTube, if you have any questions, any comments, please direct them to schoolboard@dvsd.org, and Jessica is watching the phone, and we will answer any questions you have later in the meeting. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. So tonight we have presentations. Dr. Bell.
Okay, thank you. A few months ago, we recognized our championship teams from the fall season. Tonight, we're recognizing our winter season champions. So we'll start off with Mrs. Jen Marchetti and competition cheer. Would you like to stand and tell us a little bit about your team and why you're here?
I'd like to turn it over to one of my seniors, Kayla Shapiro, who's going to speak on that team.
Hi, my name is Kayla Shapiro. I've been on the varsity football and competition team for the past 2 years. In that short amount of time, I found a lifelong cheer family. This sport has taught me discipline and teamwork that I know I wouldn't have been able to find anywhere else. Our team accomplishments include the PIAA district champions for the past 2 years in a row. This year we also came second in the virtual regional, qualified for the NHS double C in Orlando, and qualified for the PIAA state championships after team. Unfortunately, due to the COVID restrictions, we were not able to get the PIAA state championships or nationals this year. We would like to thank the athletic department, administration, and the school board for all their support, especially this year. The extra effort that went into allowing us to have a season despite of the pandemic was not as long as this really appreciated.
Thanks for coming. I'm sure you're all dying to do homework, so thanks for coming. Our next team to recognize is our girls swimming and diving, and I'll introduce the head coach, Mrs. Chelsea Schatt.
Hello, that's a tough act to follow. Today I had Victoria Corcoran here. I did invite the other state champions district champions that went states, but some of them are in fall sports and others are probably home doing homework. So we were 7-2 this year, and we were able to host the district championship, which was both fun and crazy all at the same time. And thank you for letting us do that, because we were not going to be able to have a district championship if we couldn't. And the girls were able to win, and we went on to states and swearing our hearts out. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And the third team that were district champs this year were the wrestling team, so I'll introduce Mr. Lou DeLauro.
Thank you. Great job, cheerleaders, great job, swimmers. We had a great season this year. We finished 10-1. We had a state champion, she won a state title for girls Pennsylvania division. We also had Jack Russo, lost the state finals. We had a couple of great individual accomplishments. We had Jason Henderson, who got his second state medal. He took seventh place. The state also became only second ever, actually the first ever two-time regional champ, which is a great accomplishment. Our region is probably one of the toughest, if not the toughest in the country. Jack Russo also won the region. He became the first Delaware Valley sophomore to ever win the region. And he was also the only District 2 sophomore to ever win the regional tournament. So those are pretty great accomplishments for both of these two here. As a team, we won the district as a team. We also took fourth place in that regional tournament. And we finished as a team. We lost in the state quarterfinals. So we finished top 8 State State, great accomplishment. Pennsylvania wrestling, it's pretty top notch. Actually, this year, every year they put a Team Pennsylvania against Team USA, just because of the level of wrestling Pennsylvania has. And this year, Pennsylvania beat the USA team in an action movie. So that's just a little bit of the status that guys have created and put up time in. We finished 10-1, but more importantly, this year, I don't think it was about the wins and losses. It was about the opportunities and being flexible. The kids, every day of practice they came in, they had fun. We had a lot of fun this year because we knew what was happening from one year to the next, and they took advantage of every opportunity as if it was their last. And lucky enough, we got pretty much most of our season in, so it was a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment. And we had fun, and that's the big thing. And thanks a lot for the opportunities, everybody. My colleagues, the kids, and parents, and the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we let you escape, can we just start here with the cheer girls in the front? We'll work our way back. If you're a senior, can you tell us what you're up to next year?
I'm going to the University of Tampa and I'm majoring in language.
Thank you.
I'm Nicole Weinrich. I'm going to Florida Atlantic University for communications and marketing.
I'm Olivia Dosworth, and I'm going to Fisher College and majoring in fashion merchandise.
Lily, you want to go next?
I'm a freshman at Milwaukee University. I'm going to study exercise science.
Awesome.
She's only a junior, right? And who's Mrs. Sierra?
Sierra Gillen is going to the University of Tampa, and I'm not quite sure if she's going to be here yet.
Okay. Okay.
A lot of
The other
fun.
girls are underclassmen?
Julia Weinreb is going to Montclair State, and she's majoring in education.
Super, super. Good.
Yes, and both of them are swimming in college.
Okay, good. And Zach, you're the only boy here with all these girls. Pretty good gig, buddy. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. Despite all the chaos with the pandemic, you guys persevered. And now we're now up to 7 district title teams this year, 4 in the fall, 3 in the winter, with the spring yet to go. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you very much, okay? Thank you.
Okay, let's go forward. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held on March 18th, 2021?
Motion.
Any discussion on the minutes? Any opposed? Motion carries. Student reports. Abigail and Jack, are you with us? Okay, I don't see them here. Okay, then. Okay, we'll get to them next month. Administrative reports. Any comments on the administrative reports or the attendance reports? If not, we'll move to the financial reports. Any comments on the financial reports? If not, we'll go to Dr. Bell for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just a few quick things to bring everybody up to speed. We're in the middle of spring sports. Between some of the COVID closures and the rain, they're having a heck of a time getting games in. So every day it doesn't rain, there's pretty much 4 or 5 games on campus. Every day this week has been very, very busy. So hopefully we can keep them moving in the right direction. Last meeting, there was some talk about the prom. I wanted to let you know there is a group of parents who are organizing a prom that would be off campus, obviously, and after graduation. It'd be done after graduation, so we wouldn't have to worry about anybody needing to be quarantined and missing prom or anything like that. So that, we're very thrilled for the parents to do that. Graduation is on schedule for Friday night, June 18th, 7 o'clock in Warrior Stadium. What we're monitoring right now is what will be the capacity limits at that time, and that will determine how many tickets. Right now, outdoor events are limited to 50% capacity, which would be 2 tickets for each kid. So for each senior. So we're really hoping that between now and then, that number will go up so that we could get a few more tickets for each senior. So on the calendar tonight is up for your approval is what to do with the 2 unused snow days. Right now, the kids are scheduled to get out on graduation day, Friday, June 18th. If we were to have both snow days continue to be unused, we could have the last day of school be on Wednesday. If something were to happen between now and then and we had to use one day, then we would get out on Thursday. So we'll approve those alternatives tonight, okay? The 4th marking period started yesterday, so there's actually only 43 days of school to go. I'm happy to report for the elementary kids that the DV ACE summer camp will be back. We didn't have it last year, but it'll be back this year, and that's a big help to working parents to have a place for kids to come here on campus. So if you're currently in grades K through 5, what we call rising grades 1 through 6 for the fall, they're eligible, and information will be going out through the schools real soon for summer camp. So we're happy about that. And that's all I have for you at this time, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Bell. May I have a motion to accept? Oh, I'm sorry, Rosemary.
Are you going to limit how many participants we can have at TDAs, or how are we going to deal with this?
We'll see what the signups are like, and then that'll dictate how many people and then how many rooms we use. Because we usually use the newer part of the middle school way down at the other end, and enrollment will dictate. So we should be okay, I believe. Sure.
Okay, may I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Any comments on that? Any opposed? All in favor? Motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the bills for payment, which include the general fund, the cafeteria fund, the 2021B capital projects fund, and the capital reserve fund? Motion. Any questions? Any opposed to paying the bills? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Aye.
Personnel items. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items, including resignations, appointments, requests for child rearing leaves, requests for extension of bereavement, change of status, change of salary, uncompensated leaves, and change of effective date with retirements accepted with regret? Motion, please.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we will take a short executive session to discuss student issues. We will return. Jack and Brian, we will catch up to you in the other room.
Yeah, motion.
Oh, I need a motion for executive session?
Motion. Second.
Any opposed? All in favor? I always forget we need a motion.
I know, I did too.
Man.
I-
Okay, Jack is with us. Brian, you with us?
I'm here,
Do you see
Jack.
Brian? Oh, there he is. Okay,
He's on there.
thank you. May I have a motion to return to regular session?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Items for approval. May I have a motion for the approval of the 2021-2022 paper supply bid through the Northampton Monroe Pike County Joint Purchasing Board per the attachment? I have a motion.
Motion.
Any discussion on paper bids?
Does Brian usually make a Dunder Mifflin joke right now?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Corey. Actually, the last few years, I haven't had to make that joke because somebody speaks up on my behalf. So thank you.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to amend the school calendar, changing Wednesday, April 14th, which we know was yesterday, from a full day to a half day for students? Any opposed to retroactively doing this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to amend the 2020-2021 school calendar as follows? If there are 2 days unused emergency closing days, the last day of school for students and 10-month staff will be Wednesday, June 16th, 2021. If there is one unused day, the last day of school for students and 10-month staff will be Thursday, June 17th, 2021. Motion, please. Any discussion? We all understand what that's doing?
I
Any
have a-
opposed?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't see through Corey.
I know, I'm being a pain. The teacher workday will then be,
There is no teacher workday or in-service day. They were moved from June.
that's right, to September to give
preschool,
us those
preseason,
days.
yeah.
Okay. So
So they're all
there's
done,
nothing. They'll all be
right?
done. Great, thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of Plan Con K for the Delaware Valley School District's Series A of 2021 bonds for submission to the Pennsylvania Department of Education? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion for the expulsion of student 2020-2021-10005906 for 90 school days or the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year? Motion, please. Second?
Second.
There's no discussion on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion for the expulsion of student 2020-2021-10006056 for 90 school days with the right to reapply at the beginning of the 2021-2022 school year if all stipulations are met. Motion, please.
Second.
There is no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a motion to approve the addition of girls wrestling at Delaware Valley School District beginning in the 2021-2022 school year.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion on girls wrestling? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, John. It's really a good thing to see.
It's a neat thing. I
Yeah.
never thought,
Yeah.
we had girls wrestling before, but we never thought we'd have enough for a team. and
Right.
Take them off like gangbusters, so it's exciting.
That's great. Yeah. May I have a motion to approve the high school front redesign project, option B1, at a cost of $2.15 million, including the approval of Berkavich Design Associates at a cost not to exceed 6% of the total project cost as the architect of record. And in that role, BDA is authorized to prepare construction documents, make necessary submissions for regulatory approval, and act on the district's behalf to engage consultants, testing agencies, or other professional services as required to complete all the documents. We have a motion, please.
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion. I just want to say I spoke with Dr. Bell this week, and we did put in there the change that it is limited to 6%. If you recall, the other project we just got done with that CTE was 6.5%. It will not be as complex as that project was, nor require that type of extra work. So we're getting it at normal rates, we'll call it that, 6%. Any other comments?
Yeah, Jack, I have one.
There are options. I will hand it over to Bill. If you want to discuss the options now, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Peg, John, and I had a discussion, and we thought the mix of, in option one, you'll see that with the federal government, we believe the plan, let me back up.
Before you do that, I just want to ask Brian and Jack, do you have this document in front of you?
Yes.
That was emailed.
Was it emailed to you, Jack?
Yeah, that's the three options, right,
The
Jack?
three options? Okay, great.
The three options.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, from what we've seen so far, the criteria that we could use, this would fall under the criteria. And because we're the main cafeteria area that will be expanding for use by, we decided that 5,700 out of about 7,700 is about 70% of the total project. So our recommendation is to take the 70% of the cost, or about 1.5 million, and apply that to the grant, which would leave 650,000 to be paid from our 2021B Capital Projects Fund. If you didn't like that option, we put a couple other options on there to use maybe less of the federal dollars, but we thought we should try and maximize those federal dollars, but we felt we better have it be for the area that it's primarily going to be used for the expansion of the cafeteria. Are there any questions?
Yeah, what are the total dollars we're getting from the CARES Act, from the government? And what are our other expenses? So our cyber school, that's gone up. If we take this money out of that, are we leaving ourselves a hole somewhere else?
I mean, I think, and Peg and John can help anytime here too. I mean,
Well, let's first get what's the total dollars is that we're getting under the American Rescue Plan. I think that's the first thing we want to know. And we're not trying to play stump the administrator.
No.
Yeah.
The total dollars, and that has an asterisk on it too. The total dollars is 4.8 million roughly.
Okay.
Of that, 20% has to be spent on learning loss. So we're still waiting for the criteria to say what exactly that means. So that would leave 3.83 million that's available, for which this 1.5 would come out of. We also talked about what other utilizations, as you say, Dawn, we would use, and we have roughly 600,000 for additional technology, $550,000 for a elementary math series textbook adoption that might be help me, Peg, within the next couple of years, or?
Yeah, it would be due within the next 2 years.
And these funds can be used for 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. We also have, if you remember, our capital projects list that we went out for multi-years. HVAC, it appears to be an eligible expenditure. There's about $1.2 million in the next 3 years of those projects we handed out. John, Peg, and our recommendation is if we're going to do that, we should probably do them all together. Like they may have been in 22, 23, and 24. If we're going to utilize the federal funds, maybe we would do all of those in the summer of 22. So you bid them all at the same time. That is kind of the mix of what we were doing. On the previous funds we got, we had in the pipeline anyway, for the previous funds that came before December, other projects such as reimbursing for the, and we call them COVID supplies that we had to purchase. Possibly the extra time that staff needed to clean the cafeteria, sanitize the cafeteria in the middle of the day. Online cyber, our cyber school, we found outside cybers, as I mentioned before, are not eligible for reimbursement from these funds, but the increase from 1819 or 1920 to 2021, we believe is eligible. There's a purchasing criteria that we're worried about a little bit because of the way the federal guidelines make you purchase things. We've always been with Pearson for years for that program. So if we can directly reimburse ourselves for it, we will. But we may need to, knowing that we believe our cyber online or our own cyber costs are going to go down, you also can use that for continuing, for example, to pay salaries or to pay the additional staff we hired for the Zoom and whatever. So we're still waiting to see the criteria, but we may kind of trade off, maybe not taking the risk on the purchasing regulation, so to say, and use salaries in lieu of that, knowing that the cyber cost, or hoping, or I shouldn't say hoping, expecting that the cyber cost will go down. We also, the textbooks that we already approved in January, I believe it was, that we paid 1/3 of. I think we have all agreed that from the ESSER 2 money, they call it, I'll call it prior to December, I believe we would be wise to pay those last two payments off in this fiscal year and apply for the grant funds in this fiscal year from the second dose of money that we got. And I believe I mentioned this before, that the HVAC project that we already approved, we plan on using ESSER 2 monies, not the new rescue monies, would be a wise choice, because again, it's things that are not going to recur as operating expenses, but we can help ourselves out in that. Different things have been talked about for that learning loss portion I've been talking about, including there's money in next year's budget that we have earmarked for tutoring, and Peg will talk about it later, but a behavioral consultant that that her and Diana are working on, and other learning loss programs that are becoming. So that's kind of the array of things that we're looking at. Does that answer your question?
Next month.
Does.
Mhm.
Taking so from the 3.8, the tech, the learning, I think it was a math series, and the HVAC leaves us with about 1.5 million remaining. Is that correct? And then that would be eaten up by everything you just discussed.
And we have a long spreadsheet by year, color coded for ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3 that we're working on. We're trying to get some guidance from PDE, and then so that we have a little more surety of what we're doing. And then the goal is to share that spreadsheet with you at the work session, when we're still doing more budget next time at the work session in May. But we're just trying to get some more answers before we say, even though it's a non-committal, it's our worksheet, we're not sharing it with the state. But this is our plan on how to effectively use the money to keep things out of the budget and to pay for things that would on the CapEx list that we didn't have, that we won't have to try to fund later on. We won't have to try to find our money to pay for these things later on. We'll use the federal money. So we should have that spreadsheet ready for you for the May work session, just so you can see what the plan is for the out years, because we're going to spread this money out all the way out to 2024 to be strategic. Like, we don't want to buy the math books now. We just did the brand new reading series. We want them to have time to adjust to the reading series before we do the math series and things like that. And we're doing Chromebooks in multiple years, because there's 1,100 Chromebooks that are no longer, not upgradable. What do we call them, Vicki? The Chromebooks, the 5-year-old Acers are no longer updated, right? They're no longer updated. So we used ESSER money to replace the first 1,100, but there's going to be another 1,100 Chromebooks coming, and their 5-year expiration next year. So we'll be able to give you all that spreadsheet of how the federal money is going to be used in the future years.
I had a question. I did read an article where it said that cybersecurity and charter schools in Pennsylvania have received $211 million of the same American Rescue Act. And I'd like to know if Pearson has received any of that and if they're going to pass any of that along to save that savings on to us.
Not only did the charters and cyber charters get ESSER money, they also got PPP money,
PPP
which
money,
schools were not eligible for. And they're not obligated to share any of that with anybody right now, the way the legislation is written. But there's a lot of pressure like I've never seen because there's so much money at stake that finally, I think we've got people's attention in Harrisburg to say, come on, how does this happen?
Well, if Pearson is our group, I want to know how much they've received.
Well, unless they're a school directly, if they're just as the publisher, they're not going to receive any money as a separate, but that's the Pearson Cyber.
Pearson Cyber. So if they're receiving money for educating our children, I just think we have a right to know how much that is. And yeah, and I think it's very similar to last year when our local bus company gave us a bit of a break because they didn't have to do a lot of busing in the last couple of months. And I think we carried that credit, Bill, if I'm right, over to this year. So maybe there's a credit we can go ask them for.
We'll Google, we'll find out how much money they got. But you're talking a multi-billion-dollar company, they could care less. They're not going to give us any credit, I can guarantee you.
No.
Not unless they get pressure from the state, because Pennsylvania is a very big state for cyber. Most states don't have this crazy cyber rules like we have in Pennsylvania. No. There are no such thing as cyber schools in New York State. And so this is I always said this is the Wild West of education here. So it's going to take action in Harrisburg. And we've talked to Mike Pfeiffer, we've talked to Lisa Baker. They're both with us. We're just trying to get enough Republican senators from the Philly area to be with us despite all the donations they've taken. So
the only way we can put pressure on them is if we have the data first. And I'm just hoping we can get the data and show the world the data of how much money these private companies are getting to educate our children.
Well, the really weird thing too is that if people go to RDV Cyber Academy, which is done through Pearson, it's $5,000. If they go to one of the big cyber academies that are also run by Pearson, it automatically jumps to 14 or 28, depending if they're regular ed or special ed. So it's just amazing that there's such a discrepancy between their cost and their profit. The margin is huge. Even with all their advertising expenses, their profit margin is still huge. But we'll put it on our list to track down and find out. We'll also see if I can figure out how much they got in PPP.
Yeah. Well, that's a public document. All the PPP recipients are on the
And
site.
so will ESSER be. Yeah.
Any other questions regarding?
Yeah.
One more. I'm assuming that the $650,000 that'll come out of the CapEx bill is available now since we will be doing HVAC from the money from the feds? Because last time we had a discussion about that, we were wondering where some of our money for our CapEx was going to come from. So I'm just assuming we're kind of flip-flopping the responsibility there.
Yeah, even the 500 that we already approved that's being done this summer would help offset that. But then if we certainly do the 1.2 million I mentioned too, then that'll help free that up too.
Yeah, I like the funding breakdown. I think that these are clearly eligible projects with the HVAC and the spacing out. So utilize the grant as much as possible. So I like the first funding.
I think we're all in agreement on that. We'll do option one.
I have a question.
Okay, Jack, you're up.
Okay, Jack, I got a few questions, so bear with me. The first one is the easiest of the lot. The motion, as you stated, I find that fine. But we're picking construction option B1. We have to add into that motion which funding option. So if we're going to go with option one, we have to add that into the motion.
Okay.
Which one is being funded?
Okay, would you like to make an amendment to the motion, Jack?
Yeah, so first off, I guess I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that, well, first off, do we have a consensus that everybody wants to go with option one, funding?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so then I'll make an amendment to the motion that we add that option one funding.
All in favor of the amendment to the motion, say aye. Any opposed? We've amended the motion.
All right, now the second thing I have piggybacks onto Dawn's question about the total amount of money. So we had 2.33 million come in from one of the rescue acts, and we've had three now. We've had the CARES Act, the one in January, and the one in March. Which is this 4.8? Because there was a number going around 5.2 at a time. What's the total amount of money that we have from the government bailouts?
Bill, do you have that available?
Let me work backwards. ESSER 3, or what's called the American Rescue Plan Act, is the most recent one. Again, total 4.8 million.
Okay.
The going ESSER 2, which was called CARES also, that one was 2.3 million. ESSER 1 was 479,000.
So that leaves us roughly $7.5 million.
One for special education for $6,450. There was a pre-K piece for $10,900. There was what was called the PCCD, which was a Health and Safety Act one for $421,000. And myself and my staff have been working through trying to get money from federal and Pennsylvania Emergency Management. We've already received about $36,000, primarily COVID supplies, and some staffing prior to June 30th, and we're trying to get another 50 or 60,000 that we've applied for. Haven't heard whether we're definitely going to get it. So that's what has been since COVID began.
Okay, so that puts us a little north of $8 million in rescue money.
Correct.
For a total, right? And maybe a little bit more coming, but not much more coming. So I think that answers the question when Dawn asked, the total amount of money. It's not 4.8, it's a little north of 8 million. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose $4 million here.
Well, and understanding some of it's already been purchased and accounted for. But we can explain all that next month too.
Okay, if it's possible, can we get a list of everything that we've taken in from rescue money and everything we spent it out on? Because I think that's what I had asked for 6 or 7 months ago to make sure, because we're gonna have to track every dollar.
And if we could do it all at the May meeting, because again, I'm a little leery going public with something that we don't know whether it's definitely eligible or not.
Right.
So
But you could
firm it up over the next few weeks and go from there.
You could still send that out in a PDF to the board members, so at least we have that, and we don't need to go public with it until we know for sure what we have. It's just it gives board members a round idea of what money we have coming in, what money we have going out.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thanks. That's it, Mr. Fisher. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I know we discussed this last week at the work session, but because it was a work session and not a public meeting, Dr. Bell, can you just go over again, one, about your feelings on whether there's still going to be 6-foot social distancing requirements for the cafeteria in the fall, and what are the educational purposes of this large construction area after we're hopefully out of this pandemic?
Yes. So even though we're allowed to have kids sit less than 6 feet in classes, they're still requiring 6 feet of social distancing in cafeterias because they have to take their mask off. In this drawing, you'll see it ends up being 6 foot or 6'2". If you can read that red writing, you have stronger eyes than mine. But they're all 6 feet apart or a little more than 6 feet apart. So it ends up being 62 tables with 2 people at a table, which is 124 kids can be in there with 6-foot social distancing. Then you times that by 3 lunch periods. So that takes it to 372. And if you multiply all the other spaces I talked about last time, here, the 2 cafeterias, the freshman gym, and you triple those for 3 lunch periods. This would then take us from about 1,300 seats to 1,700 seats. Now, we only have about 1,550 in the high school. So we're going to go from having a deficit to definitely having a surplus, and we might be able to get rid of some of those spaces that don't work so well by having this space. So that puts us in a really, really good place, and there won't be any restrictions or any problems if no matter how many kids come back, which is really, really good. So I appreciate Don doing that drawing and building out the 6 foot. He had these real pretty tables, and I said, no, we need white 6 foot folding tables because they help you maximize your space. We learned that from the freshman gym and the auditorium. And then there's a multitude of things that you could do with a space this big. When you look at it, it's when it's 5,500 square feet. One of the things we even said, God forbid, if we were to have a big increase in kids in the high school in the future, is that because it's a big open rectangle, you could reconfigure that into a number of rooms if you needed it in the future. So it almost gives you like another. So not only could you use it as cafeteria, not only could you use it for a large group instruction, like I talked about last week. The other thing is if you actually did grow, you could turn that into a wing. It literally could be subdivided with sheetrock and be turned into a new wing if we needed it down the road. So that's the beauty of when you pick a big, I almost said square, but a big giant rectangle with no columns or anything in the way. It really makes it flexible to use it for a multitude of different things. So it gives you a lot of flexibility for the future, and without having to come up with local dollars to pay for it, which is really, really nice. It does a short term, but it gives you a ton of things that you could use it for in the future.
Okay.
But it's just nice to know that no matter how many kids come back, we're good now with once this is done.
Is there any planning to do something like we see in the back here with these large folding walls?
Well, right now it's one big room.
Right.
Picture this, but this flat space, this rectangle we're in at a bigger magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
Picture how many tables we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Picture 62 of those tables just go on in the same direction as this. That's how big the space is.
Mm-hmm.
So, with nothing in the way to divide it. Nothing, yeah. Right. The other nice thing, you pick up a lot of room too, is because you don't have to have serving doors going in to get the food, coming out, an indoor and outdoor space for lines of kids that would be 6 feet away from the tables and all that, because they would already get their meals in the cafeteria and walk across the hall. You don't have to have any of that stuff. You don't have to have the cart with the silverware and all that other stuff. You can just literally have as many seats as possible, keeping the 6 feet distancing.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Turn my page. May I have a motion for the approval of board policies as listed 1 through 4, number 137.1, co-curricular participation by home education students, number 150, Title I, comparability of services, number 3, 810.1, school bus drivers, school commercial motor vehicle drivers, 810.3, school vehicle drivers. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Unmute, there we go.
Take your time.
Peg, can you just, because we didn't get a chance to go over these, just the one with all the changes, which is 137.1 for the co-curricular, is that recommendations by PSBA? Where's that coming?
Yeah, but I gotta defer to Dr. Ball.
Okay.
They were PSBs.
Okay, all right.
All those in
Right,
favor
nothing
say aye.
specific. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Before we go on to other business, Jess, do we have anybody who has sent any emails? At this point, if we have none, are there any questions from anybody here in attendance? If not, we're going to move on to the budget discussion. And you have in your packet tonight, starting with the blue documents here. And I guess I'll be handing this over to Bill, right, John?
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through this proposed budget, which does produce a 0 tax increase. So the first page, total salary and wage increase, that's pretty explanatory. We've discussed where that came from. So I think we can just move to the next page, Bill, number 2. Because I think we're very interested in finding out about our new teachers that we're adding to this.
Yeah, I'll let you take that. I'll take that page.
Okay.
To balance this year's budget, we had trimmed some positions last spring to get to where we needed to get to be. Based on enrollment, we were able to do some trimming. We had cut Shahola from 3 kindergartens back to 2. We had cut one of the grades at Dingman's from 7 sections back to 6. And we had cut the Dingman's primary phys ed teacher from full-time to half-time. And so actually we're proposing to put those back in, because now that we're looking at enrollment and trying to forecast what enrollment's going to look like, we need that 3rd kindergarten. We need that 7th section of 4th grade at Dingman's Elementary. And believe it or not, the primary school, which used to be smaller, has become our biggest of our 4 schools population-wise. So that'll have a ripple through the future. So we're looking to basically restore those 2.5 positions that we used to balance this year's budget. We're in need of an instructional assistant in the high school library. We had for a time where we had actually a pretty unique person who was, when the librarian retired, we had a secretary who was also our substitute caller, who had a bachelor's degree in library science and a master's in HR, who was doing our sub-calling and covering the library. But she was so good that she's now moved to the DO to become the next Cindy Baker.
Yeah.
So what had to happen is we had to get someone we're advertising now to get somebody new to be the substitute caller / DVA secretary to replace that work. And we had to put an IA into the high school library for supervision purposes because she's no longer over there. So she was wearing many hats. So the net result is we have to add another 10-month IA to cover the high school library because she's not doing double duty over there anymore. And then the network technician, we eliminated administrative position, and then we used a large chunk of that salary to pay for the network technician. So that ended up being about between those 2 positions at the bottom of the chart, ended up being a savings about $23,000 between the salary differential.
Okay, as we go on to page 3, should we hand back to Bill to go over the major changes in the budget?
Okay, as far as the employee benefits, the major changes, we talked about retirement last week. The increase on the expenditure side is $403,000. The health insurance is recommended at this point a $525,000 increase. And if you see the footnote on the bottom, that also includes needing to utilize our reserves for approximately $858,000. We haven't increased that line item in a couple years. Workers' comp is a reduction of about $14,000. Social Security is an increase of about $55,000. And note on retirement Social Security, we do get back about 58% on that. Last week, just so you know, I went back and looked at it a little harder and said, I think we can go at 58 instead of 57, which drove more money out in reimbursement based upon what we are currently getting, but understand that that formula fluctuates. But even since the last week, when I was trying to finalize the budget, the draft budget we did, that you'll see in a little bit, I increased that percentage to 58%. Any questions on page 3? Page 4, and again, everything, it seems it's got an asterisk on it anymore. So what John and I decided to do was present what we're going to call is a typical type budget. And then I'll explain in a second what could happen depending on how the accounting is going to go. So The current salaries represent about 46.46% of the budget. The benefits, 34.29. So historically, we've always been saying that salaries and benefits have been in excess or just over 80%. That's still the case. 80.75% of the budget, the traditional budget, is salaries and benefits. Now, the reason I say that is with the funds, and I still want to do more research on the accounting of it, but let's say, for example, we're going to add $1.5 million for the project you just approved and $500,000 for the HVAC we approved. And all those things, it's going to increase both sides of the budget. Yeah, we're going to get the grant money, but it's going to come in the other side. But then that would disturb the typical percentage because you're kind of temporarily or artificially adding a larger budget amount and then dividing it by the salaries and benefits. So we thought we presented tonight with kind of the traditional, and then because it won't look like this after we add in the other things we'll talk about at the May work session and what we've already approved.
Yeah, we figured if it said 72% because we added a couple million on non-salary benefits, and then next year we're at 80, it's like, what happened?
Yeah.
You know, and it was just because we're going to have a lot of these blips because of the federal funds before it peters out and levels off.
Any questions on that? If not, then if you turn the page, and for those who, you got in a couple different attachments. If you're on Zoom, Brian and Jack, you got two different attachments, and I'm going to switch to the draft budget one now, okay?
Okay.
You gentlemen good with that?
Yep, go ahead.
Let's call it a yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the proposed draft budget is revenues are projected, local revenues at just over 50 million, state revenues about 33.5 million, and federal dollars, at least in this version, of just over $2 million for a total of 85,906,000 of revenues. The expenses are 87,424. So as we mentioned last week and last October when we finalized the 1920 books, with no tax increase, this would require us to potentially use unassigned fund balance that was made from last year of 1,384,000. And in this version of the budget, we talked a little bit about this last week, that the net increase in retirement, which we have a commitment for, we would need to use 134 of that, which is the increase, net increase or thereabouts on the retirement for next year. Creates the balanced budget at $87,424,390 with zero tax increase. And the corresponding pages behind this would be the detail. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, you can review them and call me, or we'll talk about it again at the May meeting. But I pretty much on revenues, I will say on real estate taxes, because we had a discussion last year about what we should do. And what I did this year was take and use the actual collection rate that we did receive during this year, which was actually slightly better than the year before. So I used that rate. And we did have an increase in assessed value. Again, I get it every month from the assessment office. And the increase in assessed value being put on the tax rolls has increased this year. And I've estimated it to be 0.88%, which is higher than it certainly have been recently, which drives about $400,000 additional because the tax base increasing. You'll see some other things that I did in there. I did increase transfer tax because it's going good, but I don't believe you can think that it's going to continue to be tremendous if for no other reason inventory. But I did increase it from 800,000 to 950. Delinquent taxes are difficult. We're having a pretty good year with them after 3 quarters, but I used a 3-year average of actual collections because I didn't want to get burnt by that. So I used the last previous 3 years actual. I did not include in here any increases from the state for our basic subsidy or special ed. If we're not going to have a tax increase, the rumor, or we're not positive, but our state associations or whatever are kind of saying with the states, they think because they lost a lot of sales tax revenue and their personal income revenue, that the best you can hope for is to get what you had last year. The reason you'll see a reduction here is because we expected to get an increase last year when we passed the budget. So this is based upon not getting an increase this year. Did you follow that? Okay. What else? Oh, and you'll see, they just got these grant codes out. If you go on the bottom of page 2 under revenues, you'll see code 8744. Department of Education just got that out to us yesterday. And so that's the account code. So I'm glad they got it before I had to get the first version out here. But you will see that I mentioned about in that 216,000 so far that's in here is the tutoring, the mental or behavior consultant, and about $50,000 with middle school textbooks. That is in here already, but I thought that was close enough to traditional, and since we kind of made no decisions, those are in here. What's not in here are those other equipment and construction type things, and that when we go to the next month's budget, we may add them in, but we'll add them in on both sides.
I have a question on
Sure.
page 2. Under the Safe School Initiative, now, have we been receiving money under that grant?
Yeah, I mean, it's like they never kind of let you know, whatever, the 25,000 you're talking about?
But it goes back to 2017. We have blanks going across from 2017 all the way through 22. So I'm just wondering why no amount is listed for any of those years?
You're talking about the 25,000.
Well, there's, it's
7360.
Oh, I believe that they just changed the grant number on that, and it ended up being the next line. I mean, they changed it from Safe Schools, I believe, to School Safety and Act 44.
Oh, so it has a new name, so that grant.
Is that what it was, John? Act 44?
Yeah, that was after the Parkland, Florida shooting. They upped the money and changed the name of the funding source. So that's why it dropped from the one category down to the other.
So in 2020, we did not receive any funds for that category?
No, but we did get the 45 in the category below it.
So this, oh, okay. And is that a 5-year type of program? Grant?
I'm sorry, Pam, what was that?
Would you get, that's a 5-year, you're approved for 5 years?
No, this is in the annual.
Hey, Chris, the school safety grants, we have to apply for them annually, right? The 25,000 and the 45. Do we know why it went to?
But they rolled it into the code in the last 2 years.
So that's why it's not here.
So we haven't had to submit for it the last 2 years.
So I was reading where there's a very large amount of money coming down in that category. So if you perhaps could research and update us, perhaps we could be applying for more. I don't know.
As soon as they come out with it, usually Chris and I will be the first to get notified. Me because of the chief school officer, and he because of he's the representative that usually does the grant. So usually we get the blast, whether it's from PCCD or it's through PDE. We'll get notified right away if any of that new funding is ready to be applied for through E-grants, which Peg does for us.
Any questions on the revenue side of things? So the collection rate is 93%?
93.11 is what we technically put in there.
Which is what we actually collected in the current year.
Hey, Bill,
And of our transfer taxes, we're over $1.1 million already, and we're budgeting $950. We could end the year at $1.4 million.
Mhm.
So it seems like we're being a little, in my opinion, a little over conservative with the $950. But I understand that when you're a budgeteer like you are, you want to be conservative on the revenue side. But I'm always concerned about that PSERS usage. I never thought I'd live to see the day where we used the PSERS. I didn't think I'd be on the board when it happened, because it was always in the future, and we had the money sitting on the side for when things start to get a little out of control for us. Perhaps you've looked at the audit report that shows that we do owe, I mentioned this to John, $128 million to PSERS, according to the audit report, and we have $6 million set on the side. So we're really far behind in terms of trying to fund that gap, and we'll never catch up. But the longer we can push it out, the better. But if that's the option that the board wants to do, is use the PSERS money this year, I understand it totally. This is an odd year. However, I probably would put another 128,000 into the transfer taxes and eliminate the PSERS until somebody pushes us to use that. And certainly I want to use reserves that other people are holding for us, mainly the EBTEB. They're holding our reserves. So I would much rather use their money, so to speak, than utilize our own reserves at this point. But it's a board call. I think we all want the number one item is not to have a tax increase. How we go about getting there is, I guess we could all have our own opinion on it. But my opinion would be, let's use the EBTEB. Let's increase the transfer taxes and not use that PSERS just yet, only because of the many years that we have spent building that minor amount. $6.2 million is a minor amount when you compare it to the tremendous dollar amount that we owe, that the state owes. This is our portion of it. And there is no guarantee. When we spoke to the auditors, the state pays a good portion of that. But since there's no guarantee that they're going to do that, it is ultimately our liability. And it's very nice for the state to pay, is it 57 or 58% of that every year?
Hey, I just did the number. I took the 128 and I backed out 59% of it.
59.
And we still left us on the hook for 52 million.
Yeah, and we have 6 million on the side, 6.1. So I kind of like to hold off, but if that's where the board wants to go, it's strictly.
I mean, there's a multitude of things we can do to get that 134 if you want to try to leave your reserve account where it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether we increase some revenue numbers or we do more in unassigned fund balance. You know, ultimately, it's all going to come out in the wash one way or another, and we probably don't know. Just like last year, we didn't know what to do. We talked about, do you raise taxes 800,000? And we were right in the beginning of the pandemic, and we said we can't do that. Mm-hmm. So then the other option was, do we slice 800,000 out of our budget, not knowing where we were headed, and then get to the spring and say, oh, we shouldn't have done that. We cut programs or we made class sizes bigger. So you guys said, let's use the 800,000 which was the surplus from the year before, or a portion of it. You said, let's use the surplus and then let's see how everything plays out, because who knew, right? And lo and behold, we didn't need to use that 800,000. So what we did is we saved cutting programs or increasing class sizes by doing that, by taking the route of, okay, let's just set the money aside and it's there if we need it. That's the same plan this year with the 1.384, but we can finagle with that a little bit too. If you want to protect your reserves, your OPEBs and your PSERS another year. If you want to try to dodge that bullet, we can fool with it for you.
Yeah, because you mentioned last year, this is a 3-year budget that we've been working on.
Right.
So I'd like to be able to get through the 3 years without using the PSERS.
Yep.
And next year, when we're sitting here doing this again, and we don't have, I guess, any more ESSERS monies coming in and things like that, maybe that'll be the year we can do it.
Right.
But that's my own opinion.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Don.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jack O'Leary, you are now up. Go ahead.
Okay, Jack, Mr. Fisher, you kind of beat me to the punch there.
Okay,
but
sorry.
I asked this question last year, so I have to ask it again this year. But I would rather, as you say, Jack, use the EBTEB money and the transfer tax money this year for this reason alone. First off, next year, as Bill stated earlier, the inventory of homes sooner or later, that's got to end. And the transfer tax, we've been fortunate with the transfer tax because homes are turning over. But sooner or later, that inventory runs out. So the question I brought up last year, and this is why I want to save that pieces fund money, because I think we're going to be using some of that money next year. In 2019, 2020, our budget was 83 million. And we didn't raise taxes going into 2020, 2021, but our budget grew by roughly 1.8 million. It grew to 84.9, the budget we're on currently right now. And this year's expenses of 85 million would cover last year's, or this year, the year we're currently on, it would cover our expenses of 84.9. But it seems like we're behind a year and $2 million, because now we're growing the budget again. We're not raising taxes, but it's growing up to $87 million. So what I wanted to know last year is, by increasing to 84 from 83, how much of a hole does that put us in this year? And obviously this year was an extraordinary year. So we're not actually in a hole this year, but now we've gone, in the 2 years, we've gone from 83 to 87. And I got to ask the question, how much of a hole are we going to be in next year? So for that reason, and that reason alone, thinking forwardly, I would agree with you, Jack, about the EBTEB money and the transfer tax money, because I do think we're both conservative, but that's even a bit too conservative for me. So I would rather not take out of the pieces until, because if to me, I'm going to go in safe and say we're going to need some of that money next year. And I'd rather take it out. It's a bank account, and you always got to take it out of the savings, but I'd rather take it out next year than this year. So I would agree with you, and for that reason.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay, I mean, if that's, I certainly could make an argument that if you feel like if you want to not use the PSERS committed fund balance and anticipate that we're going to continue with transfer tax at the 135,000 higher than I budgeted, I'm fine with that, as long as the group, that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I think
Everybody want to do that? So when I come next month, I'll have that already accounted for. Okay. And the second thing on if the EBTEB monies, we thought we were going to end up using 835,000 of fund balance this year, but because of the transfer tax and different things that have occurred, if I didn't do the 525 next year, my concern is that when we don't fund that and you anticipate taking it out of reserves, it could end up biting you down the road. Like 1.3 could turn into, with a 5% increase, which is a national trend, you could end up getting close to 2 million. However, under the circumstances, strange times, I will drop the 525 out of there. But if you recall, in the year we're in, we took what they call a funding holiday from paying the full amount into the trust. And therefore, if I can still have a surplus and maybe pay what we did not pay, I took the month of October basically and didn't pay it, then maybe I will attempt to do that to kind of offset what we're not going to do in 525. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
All right, I'll come back with the 134. We won't use the PSERS, and the 525 I'll reduce and attempt to take that out of the reserves, with me funding it this year if I can.
Bill.
Fair enough? Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jack. Yep.
Thank you.
I guess, Bill, the final question I got to ask you is what I asked you last year. By doing this way and increasing our budget without raising the taxes, are we, I know you don't have the crystal ball and we've talked about that, but are we digging ourselves an insurmountable hole by doing this? Or is that something we can most likely overcome as we did this year?
And I guess I'll answer it the same way. When I was sitting there last year, I thought we'd be 800,000 in the hole. Never dreamt the transfer tax would be what it is. So let's say we got saved there. I'll briefly touch on the expenditure side. Now, we have increased our expenditure side by over $1.3 million over the prior year to pay for cyber schools. So if people, I mean, it's a better education here and everything. If people, and when COVID hopefully releases, that if we have less costs in cyber, then that's going to help your bottom line. So as much as I'd like to answer that, Jack, if the budget went exactly like it was, you would be $1.3 million. Well, now we're going to take the 500,000, but I still worry about that. You're going to be 800 to 1.3 million short going into the next year when you may need another 1.8 million to pay for salaries and benefits and whatever may happen. So, and we also budgeted no increase in state revenue this year. I can't tell you what's going to happen there. So I think the cyber students coming back to in-school, and hopefully some outside cybers come back to either our cyber or in school. And maybe then we wouldn't end up using this, but at this time, as we talked last week, you saw the numbers that we were budgeting. They're less than this year, but they're certainly not down to where they were in 18-19.
Right. Well,
I just, Jack, kind of your question is, if we ended up spending everything that was in the budget this year, we would have started the next budget in the whole 800,000 because we used 800, we carried over from surplus.
Exactly.
And we didn't, thank God. So therefore that 800,000 was unused. So that was great. Now going forward for next year, if we spend all of that 1.384 plus another 130. So if we spend that spend that whole 1.5 on the expenditure side of the budget this year, we will start next year's budget in the hole for 1.5. Then we'll have increased salary costs. So we'll probably add another 1.5. So theoretically, next budget, we would be starting 3 million in the hole. And we'd have to cover that with a couple of ways. We'd have to cover it with using our reserves and raising taxes. The goal, of course, is that we underspend the budget so that instead of us carrying a burden of 1.3 into next year and piling on next year on top of it, that we get lucky in some way. You never know where you get lucky. You just hope you get lucky somewhere in some accounts, because we thought we would start this year 800 in the hole and we didn't, because revenues were better than we ever dreamt. But that 1.3 is a hole that will have to be plugged somehow, some way, if we spend it. If we don't spend it, then it's available for future use, which is great. So
right. And that's what I really just wanted to have the focus on, that this budget, we know what the expenses are, but we have to really work during the year to undercut those expenses. And I think with the cyber costs, the best way to cut those cyber costs is what we've done tonight, put an extension on so we can get more kids safely into a cafeteria. Because I think when we can bring more children back like that, that's going to cut cyber costs down. And any which way we can cut costs next year, we're going to have to all concentrate on that and work towards that, because we don't want to wind up in a hole. Because I'd like to sit around, and I'm sure Mr. Fisher next year, and say, we don't have to use Peace's money for another year. You know what I mean? So, all right. I appreciate your viewpoint on that, Bill. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
So my question on the state revenues is, right now we're building no increase in for the state at all. And in the last 5 years, have we had a year where they don't ever give us anything more? I mean, normally every year we're getting 2 to 3, 400,000 more. And now you're saying you want to go to zero. And I understand, because the state is kind of in a really tough spot, but the state is also getting rescue money. And we don't know where that's going yet. Maybe Lisa and Mr. Pfeiffer, they know, and maybe we want to talk to them, because I'd be surprised if the state gets billions of dollars out of this 1.9 trillion, that we're not going to get anything more than we received the prior year. So we have to really keep our finger on that number.
There's a big consensus in Harrisburg from the legislators. The feds took care of you. We don't have to.
Oh, is that?
So we're going to use that money elsewhere.
That's great.
Annual
Yeah.
funds from the state and schools. When the federal money drives out, we'll be 4 years behind schedule in terms of the appropriate funding from the state. And the state is already terrible. I think we're either 44th or 46th in terms of funding education. Pennsylvania is one of the worst in the country.
And that Lancaster lawsuit is now underway, from what I understand. And that could, if that was a win, that could radically change the way money is distributed. I don't know if we're on the positive end of that or not.
The big push is right now, new money goes through the fair funding formula, but there's a whole harmless. They want all state money to go through the fair funding. If that happens, we'll lose millions.
Right.
Millions. So that's why we've lobbied to you have to have the whole harmless and let it accrue over time with all the new funds, not baseline funds.
All right. Well, this has been an excellent discussion on the budget. I think, Bill, that was the end of your presentation.
I'll just tell you that, and there's always the expenditures by object code is in here now, and then the grants that we currently have in the budget are in here. And then there's the supplemental information in the back that people have asked for regarding the contracts and stuff. So,
Bill, I just would like to thank you for keeping those reserves healthy, because that has helped us tonight greatly, and for fighting for our impact aid. We haven't heard much about that, but I know you were probably out there still fighting for that. There's been a small decrease in that amount in the impact aid.
yeah, every January there's an application process, and we keep our foot in the door there. And we typically get the number is 699,000 and change, and we've been getting that. And then they make adjustments from 2 years ago for a small amount that you never know what you're getting, but it depends how many people either have now applied or are eligible. So that, but pretty much the 700 we've been getting every year. And again, through an application process, and then they do an adjustment of a prior year every 2 years.
That's a real bonus too. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the end of our budget presentation tonight. Anybody on our questions on the phone? No? Okay, so we'll move on to announcements. May 3rd, 2021. I thought I did. Did I already make the motion about Jack's change and approved? Yeah. The amendment, yeah. I amended that. Yep, no worries. May 3rd, 2021, DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee, 6 p.m., a Zoom only. May 6th, 2021, work session, 6 p.m., right here in the Delaware Valley High School auditorium. May 13th, 2021, regular board meeting, 6 p.m., Delaware Valley High School auditorium. The public is welcome to attend all of these meetings in person or watch them on our YouTube via our website. dvsd.org. Questions and comments may be directed to schoolboard@dvsd.org. Due to the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, and or inclement weather, these meetings may be subject to change. Please check the website for any updates. I have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.